Welcome to another episode of the Edmonds Mom's Room podcast. I am Dr. Allison Bell, your host, mom of three, entrepreneur, and owner of Body Motion Physical Therapy. We have locations in Edmonds and Poulsbo, Washington, and I am so happy to be here with you today. This is the second episode of the new year, and currently recording when the first week of the new year is coming up on wrap. And yeah, how did your new habits go? Your new patterns? Were you able to wire in any changes yet? So these are my thoughts for what's going on. And I will say I didn't have any changes I wanted to do other than just keep on doing what I'm doing. And feeling pretty good. It feels good to have the energy of the new year. As you may or may not know, I have a coaching program where a lot of women check in once a week and we do some group calls. And really, it's just focused on having high energy, feeling good, having strong mindsets so we can show up for our families and just be badass moms. So that has been really fun because everybody in that group has a ton of new year energy of just sticking to their health plans and wellness goals, and I absolutely love that. I love that with a caveat though, because I want that to be the energy that shows up on a dreary February day when no one wants to get out and hit their 10,000 steps, or when you don't really want to drink your gallon of water a day, or you don't really feel like meal prepping. So how do we keep that mojo and that mindset going when it's the middle of February, dark outside, daylight is minimal, and we're not feeling motivated and inspired anymore? So that's where I really believe that you have to set, instead of just setting your goals, you have to set your identity. Who are you going to become in order to be the person you want to be? When you start creating that internal identity and you map out who that future Allison is going to be, and it is so much easier to make goals in line with who that person is going to be. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't, you're not happy with who you are now. It just means who is it that you dream and desire to be? And when you have that in mind, all of a sudden the goals and the habits to be that person, they're easier to attain because you can hit them whether you're motivated or not. You can hit them when you feel like doing your best work or when you don't. You just hit those habits that you need to wire in and get you to attain that person you want to be, attain that new identity, and it becomes a lot easier because you don't need the motivation when you're already identifying as mentally as that person, your future self, who you want to be. So I think that's just a good little kick off to this episode. And I am grateful that you're here and listening to this. And hopefully you are feeling motivated for the new year, motivated to tackle your health and wellness, motivated just for life, right? If you think that you're just an average person doing average things, put here to be average, and you're nothing more, it's going to be really impossible for you to map out new changes in your life because you're simply just going to be I'm average. What is the point? What is the point of me, rewiring in these new habits? Yeah, you might want to be healthy or look a little slimmer, here and there. But if you just think I'm just cut from average, I'm average, there's going to be no motivation to take that extra coaching class, take that extra wellness, join the wellness community. There's no extras happening because you're just I'm average. Why would I deserve that? Why would I do that? Why would I better myself? And so it's truly a mindset. And it has to all start from the mindset. And any change starts with the mindset. And it has to be such a deep belief. So that's why I keep saying the moms that I'm working with, they're just world-class moms. They're world-class humans because they want so much more for their own selves and their own families. And so when they operate like that, they make choices and plans to invest in their health and wellness and mental health to get them to feel a certain way that is in line with that identity that they want to be and that they want to serve. So a little bit of deep thought today on this. This will be a Friday morning when this drops. So I hope that hits well for you. So we had our annual team meeting here at Body Motion this week where we mapped out the plans for 2025 and for the business, what we want to improve upon or do better in, and how we are going to achieve that, who's going to be responsible for that, and just lots of ideas around how we can continue to enhance the experience here at Body Motion. And it was just a really fun day. And some of the takeaways that we worked on our own personal goals and how our own personal goals are so intertwined and in line with the business goals. And it just really went to show like how awesome of a culture that we have amongst our team here at Body Motion. And so it was a beautiful day, beautiful experience. A couple things that I spoke about that day is when you surround yourself with people who level you up, you are who you surround yourself with. So if you're the smartest person in the room, or you're the strongest person in the room, or you're the fittest person in the room, you need to level yourself up and your surroundings up so you can be around people that can continue to level you up. And I think that was such a great lesson. And it really is the reason why I seek coaching, right? It's the reason I'm in different business groups. It's the reason that I pursue my fitness. It's so I can continue to level myself up and be around people that are doing it really well, who I admire, who I want to mirror my life after, or different, certain aspects of my life after. And so it was just a great day filled with a lot of great insight from people. And part of me had an idea that I was gonna have either the day be about world-class customer service and product delivery, or it was going to be about letting go. But I decided that this coming year I didn't want to have a year of divorces or split marriages or relationships, so we went with the world-class because I've already been down that road. And I think that's the beauty of what we do. Everything, when we have team meetings, they're deep, they're powerful, they are moving, and they level you up to be a better and stronger version of yourself. And sometimes that does mean that you leave people behind that don't bring you joy, that don't enhance your life, that maybe hold you back. And so I've noticed that from a business culture perspective. And, as we've had team members evolve and grow and become powerful women and humans, they already were, but continue that evolution, people and things change and evolve in their own personal lives outside of here. And I think that partly is a reflection of the personal growth that they achieve by being members of this team. And now that might scare the living crap out of everybody who's listening to this, because they're like, why would we ever work for you? But it's just true. Like, the people that want to grow, that want to evolve, that want to change this world and help empower women and change women's healthcare, that's who we hire. And so they have that growth mindset, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. My only wish and desire really is that, like, when they join the company, they leave as a better person, a better human, a better, make some kind of, be on the trajectory to make an impact, a positive impact on humanity. And that's really what I hope for my team members, for the moms in the wellness program, across the board. So it's been a ton of fun. This meeting was a ton of fun, and I'm not going to dive into much more there because I saved that for our wellness team, or our wellness coaching clients, and that's so I really dove into that and hit that hard in our coaching call this week as well. And so that was a ton of fun. But let's dive into what this topic is all about today. And what we are going to talk about is how to have a healthy and fit core and pelvic floor. So what does a true healthy and fit core and pelvic floor mean? And this could be regardless of whether you're postpartum or not. Like, so many people just want to have a fit core and a fit pelvic floor, and they think that that means doing Kegels, and they think that that means doing a bunch of sit-ups, and that really couldn't be further from the truth, okay? So I wanted to get into the nitty-gritties of the essentials to have a fit, healthy, and happy core. And in case you need a refresher for what a true and real healthy and fit mom needs to stay pain-free, that's what we're going to go through in this episode. And it is a healthy and fit, strong core. And when our core is strong, it is absorbing the forces every time our foot hits the ground, every workout we do, every time we step foot out of our beds, every time we pick our kids up. If you have a strong core, it is helping stabilize your spine, stabilize your joints, and absorb the forces and the impact that come with doing impact activities. If the core is strong and it's absorbing the shocks, that means that your joints don't have to absorb the shocks, and that means that your joints don't wear out over time. When they wear out over time, that creates arthritic changes or degeneration in the joint, which then can lead you to having joint pain, joint injections, joint replacements or fusions of the lumbar spine, and we want to avoid all that. So we avoid that by navigating, building really strong, fit, and healthy cores. And again, not through six-pack abs. Six-pack abs are simply just a condition of how well your nutrition is, right? Like how much can you diet down to decrease your body fat and get six-pack abs? It has very much zero to do with how strong your core actually is. So I just want to make that disclaimer and really hammer that point home, okay? So let me mute my computer here. So what needs to happen for you to have a strong core, even if you haven't had kids? What needs to happen for you to have a strong core if you are rebuilding after kids? So let's just dive into it. So the core, when people talk about the core is composed of different muscles. The top of the core is your diaphragm muscle. This is responsible for breathing. Inhaling, your diaphragm contracts and flattens down. Exhale, it becomes a dome shape underneath your rib cage. Inhale, it flattens down. Exhale, dome shaped under your rib cage. That is the top of the core. The bottom of the core, of course, is the 3 layers of the pelvic floor. That needs to expand, overstretch, and contract. It is going to expand and overstretch for things like farting, for things like pooping, for things like relaxing to go pee, and then it is going to sit in a neutral position and also contract when your foot hits the ground or when you do a jump. It has to move a little bit as a reaction to the forces from your joints, okay? And it moves in coordination with the diaphragm. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see this, but when you inhale, the diaphragm flattens and the pelvic floor opens. When you exhale, the diaphragm becomes a dome shape. It goes into a recoiled position, and then the pelvic floor elevates and recoils. And then you inhale and the pelvic floor opens, diaphragm flattens, and then you get this nice dynamic between those two muscles, or at least you should. That needs to happen to have a strong, fit, and healthy core. Now, most people that walk into this clinic, that walk around town, but most people, when they are in this, when they walk into this clinic, they have very tight and constricted pelvic floors. Their pelvic floors don't have a lot of movement. And that is a big, big problem. Because usually when they're tight and constricted, you might think that's great. Oh, my vagina's tight. It will feel good for my partner, yada, yada, yada. Could not be further from the case. A healthy, strong vagina that feels tight for their partner is actually a vagina that's super hydrated and the muscles are bulky. And they're bulky because they have this amazing eccentric strength, which means it's a strength where the pelvic floor can like open and then contract. When you have that opening and contraction, that's what creates a beefy, healthy pelvic floor, and that's what's going to create that vaginal tightness and plumpness that we actually want. Okay, so most people, when they're like, "Well, I want my vagina to be tight," right? Like that's good. Like no. That's not good. Like if it is tight, it's more cement-like. When it's cement-like, it's dehydrated and it can't move. Dehydrated muscles are stringy and fibrous and they feel like the texture of beef jerky. And that doesn't feel good for a partner to be rubbing against beef jerky, right? And that's when sex honestly doesn't feel that good for us, is when our muscles feel beef jerky-like. So A good tip is to start to get range of motion of your pelvic floor. You can use your diaphragm to help you breathe and start to get range of motion for the pelvic floor. We have tons of videos on our YouTube channel that will give you that coordination of movement and teach you how to start doing it. But that's really where, like, working with a pelvic expert physical therapist, someone who can get into all of the muscles of the pelvic floor, not just the first layer, not just the second layer, not just the third layer, but every single muscle, and like really start to restructure the muscle so you're not cemented in a beef jerky type texture, so you can open your pelvic floor and get more motion, which is going to give you just all the health around those pelvic floor muscles and help improve the health of those pelvic floor muscles. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of why that's so important. When the pelvic floor, it doesn't have that healthy relaxation and those muscles can't open up, that's going to make things like sex not as good, not as pleasurable. It might even hurt with initial penetration or with deeper thrusting. Positions where you're like on top or in like a doggy style position, it might feel more painful with deeper thrusting, or you might just not be able to tolerate it at all. You might feel like your partner's hitting something in those different positions. You might also have incontinence because of the tightness. And so people are like, but I'm tight, I shouldn't be leaking. Well, if the pelvic floor can't contract and relax, then it's just going to be in a really tight position, which can then put more pressure on the bladder, causing more incontinence. So that's where it's like, we have to get that range of motion. We have to get that opening of the pelvic floor. And once we get that opening, then we can work on everything else. But really all you need is that freaking opening. And then if you work on the rest of your core, that's where the strength comes from. And the pelvic floor doesn't need Kegels, because every time your foot hits the ground, if you have the eccentric control and elongation of the pelvic floor, then you're automatically gonna have the contraction. And that's what I think people really miss. And that's why it's like, when you train Kegels, like what is the point? I haven't done a Kegel, this is interesting actually. I haven't done a Kegel probably in years. I might have done it a little bit right after Jayla was born, because I wanted to like see like, okay, do I have that connection to contract my pelvic floor volitionally? Like, can I mentally be like, go squeeze the pelvic floor? I just did it actually right now. And you can do that too. Like, can you just sit there and contract your pelvic floor? Okay, perfect, good, you did it. But really like and so I checked my own quality of my tissue the other day, and I was like, just like feeling around like, okay, my pelvic floor feels stronger than it's ever felt. Like, I can't even remember a time. And I truly believe it's because of my weightlifting. Like, it's not because I do any Kegels whatsoever. The only thing I do is I get pelvic floor work done, I maintain my pelvic floor range of motion, and then I train the crap out of my glutes, out of my core, out of my lats and my back, which then support all the pelvic organs and support the pelvic floor itself. So in order to train your pelvic floor, really all you need is breath work. All you need is a good breath work program and a fitness and lifting routine. Because if you have that going on, then your lifting, as long as your breath patterns, when you're like even doing your bicep curls and standing up and you're in a good postural position, then you're using your pelvic floor naturally. And so I was really shocked at how dense and like strong my pelvic floor felt the other day when I checked my own pelvic floor muscles. Now also, I will like asterisk this and say like I still have a prolapse and it's still there, and it's, you know, it doesn't feel like it's getting worse by any means, but it's still there, and I don't love how it's not progressing and not getting better. And I do need to invest in getting more pelvic floor work done, because I went like a whole month without it. And then once I got back in on Monday and I got it again, it was like, oh, my body can breathe again. Like, you can literally breathe deeper after getting pelvic floor work done, because your lungs and diaphragm can expand more, because there's just more space once your pelvic floor isn't so congested and so tight. Your glute workouts are going to be so much better too. So that's my little side note and my little plug for like, get your pelvic floor worked on. Like, there's nothing better. There's nothing better. And if you want to be fit and healthy, like, you just constantly have to maintain that pelvic floor range of motion, and keep your body balanced. Like, that's the whole thing about prevention, right? Like, if you are keeping your body balanced with what you can do with a pelvic floor physical therapist, you know, that's why we have our once a month program. If you keep your body balanced, then the forces are going to be evenly distributed throughout your body and absorbed by your core and not your joints, which is going to keep you out from underneath the knife, right? So that is the take-home message. And does this take sometimes years postpartum to get your body to respond and start to like be able to only need monthly? Yeah, it can take years. It just depends what your patterns are. It depends what, what your body is doing. It depends if you have underlying things like endometriosis or PCOS, or you've had, irritable bowel syndrome and all that stuff. So it really depends on like the person itself, but I believe that like everyone should have pelvic floor work done once a month. It should be a non-negotiable. It keeps our bowels moving better. It keeps our hips moving better. It keeps pain out of the low back. It keeps us away from having sciatica, keeps us out from underneath the knife for joint replacements and bladder surgeries. And it is just simply the bee's knees. So get your pelvic floor work done. But outside of that, let's talk now. Let's take it out from away from the diaphragm and away from the pelvic floor. Nope, I lied. Let's go back to the diaphragm. So getting the diaphragm to drop down into the belly is important, and equally getting the diaphragm to be able to expand in a lateral position through what we call intercostal breathing is also important. Now, a lot of times people already have that rib flare going after childbirth, and so we don't necessarily work on that aspect of the core strengthening right away as we try to bring the ribs closer together and back together. But I just wanted to make a side note. So both types of breathing, diaphragmatic breathing and lateral costal breathing, are excellent forms of breathing to help restore the core after kids, and or just strengthen the core even if you've never had kids. So it's very important that you can do both directions of movement for the diaphragm. And okay, so moving away from diaphragm, moving away from pelvic floor, now we drop into the front of the core. The front of the core, you have your six-pack ab muscles called your rectus abdominis muscles. You have your internal and external obliques, and you have your deep transverse abdominis muscle. Now, this is the muscle that is low and deep, and it's underneath the navel, and it's down to the pubic bone, and it actually wraps around to the low back and to the lumbar spine. And it is one of the most underutilized muscles, and it becomes kind of dormant and dead during pregnancy because it stretches out so much. And a lot of times when people think like, oh, I'm tightening my abs, I'm keeping my core tight, they're just using their upper abs, so they often are just using their obliques and they're just using their rectus abdominis, and they're not driving their motions with their lower abdominal muscles, so your deep transverse abdominis muscle. It's that deep transverse abdominis muscle that when it's strengthened, it's going to keep all the pain out of your back, it's going to keep the pain out of your hips, and it's going to keep your pelvic organs in a really good place. So if you can isolate contractions of your deep transverse abdominis muscle, it is going to do your body wonders. But in so many people, that muscle just is very hard to recruit. They don't activate that muscle correctly. Again, that's where working with a pelvic expert physical therapist can absolutely be important in order to get you connected to your deep transverse abdominis muscle so you can isolate that muscle. Now, a lot of times people ask me, when I activate that muscle, should my pelvic floor be contracting? Now, yes, when that muscle contracts, you may feel your pelvic floor activate and contract. What we like to do is we like to separate that movement. And it really depends on the person. I'm just going to put a disclaimer out there. But if you can be able to pull in your lower abs, your transverse abdominis, and relax your pelvic floor, that is amazing. And that is the coordination and control that you want in order to have a really fit and strong core. Most people we see when they come to the office and we teach them to use a lower abdominal muscle contraction, they're actually getting that muscle because they're driving the entire thing with their pelvic floor, and they're maybe just getting a flicker of the lower abdominal muscles, and it's because there's overflow between those two muscle groups. So if you do a Kegel, you will also feel that lower abdominal muscle go, but the idea is that if you can separate those, that would actually be better. The reason I like to separate them is based on this ligament called Herschel's ligament that goes from your belly button down to your bladder. If we can drive the lower abdominal muscles to contract and elevate, then they're gonna lift the bladder up. And if you can do that before the pelvic floor contracts, then you have a better chance of being continent, of keeping your pelvic organs in place. But if your pelvic organs are hanging a little low after childbirth, which in a lot of people they are, in a lot of people even without kids, they're hanging a little low, and you Kegel, and your pelvic organs are below the line of your pelvic floor, they're actually going to get pushed further out. That's why I'm not a huge fan of Kegeling. And that's where it's like, if you can train the lower abs to drive most of your movement in your core training, but in all of your weight training, so from squats to lunges to shoulder press to chest press, if you can train your lower abdominal muscles to be turned on and then do the movement, then that is the kind of deep core training and deep core strength that you actually want. And if you can train that to happen at the same time that you can have some relaxation in your pelvic floor, you're just going to have better core control. So hopefully that makes sense, and you can understand that. Even if you are training in sit-ups or doing planks, you still want to drive all the movement with the lower abdominal muscle. So if you're doing a sit-up but you're not engaging the lower abdominal muscle, you're still going to be predisposing yourself to having a diastasis. That's why even a lot of men have a lot of diastases, because they haven't recruited those lower abdominal muscles. And if you're doing this for aesthetic purposes and you want to have a flat stomach, and no shame in that, or you want to, be able to pull your gut in a little bit more, that's why a lot of men end up having diastasis as well. So I wanted to touch on that aspect of the core. So we have now talked about the diaphragm. We've talked about the pelvic floor. We talked about the lower abdominal muscles. Now we're going to go to the backside. The backside is so important. And this is where it gets so weak in so many moms. And not just moms, people in general, because most of the things we do in our society are in front of our bodies, whether it's on our cell phones or watching TV or on our computers, and we're not standing in an, upright, erect position with our back in our back muscles turned on. And our back muscles are the backside of our core. They have to be super strong. So the back muscles that are the most important, that become very weak in almost everybody, are the lower traps, the lats, and the glutes. These all have to be super strong so that they can absorb the shocks, be part of a very strong core system. And believe it or not, the lats have such an impact on bladder incontinence and incontinence itself. And so if you're not training your lats and lower back muscles, then you're missing out on a huge aspect of the importance of getting bladder control. And so hopefully this episode will be like, okay, I better find some back workouts on YouTube now, right? So the back and the lats have an extreme importance to the core. And there's these little muscles in your spine called multifidi muscles, and they're mainly just stabilizing muscles. If you can get your transverse abdominis to fire, you most likely have good control of your multifidi muscles. Multifidi muscles are super hard to isolate, but I'm just giving them a little shout out because they are part of the core. So hopefully you found this episode helpful. Hopefully you're now like, okay, I better figure out how to activate the entirety of my core. And it should be active during your upper body days, during your lower body days. If you're a CrossFitter, it should be active. If you do bar and Pilates, it should be active. I've met many people who go to bar and Pilates, but yet they have very poor core control. And that shouldn't be the case, right? But it's because it's all about our brain connection to these muscles. If your brain can't connect to your glutes and you only feel squats and lunges in your quads and hamstrings, you have a core problem. And you absolutely need to learn how to use your glutes and get into your deep core muscles, because else you're going to be wearing out your joints. Hands down. So if you don't know how to feel your glutes, then work with a pelvic expert physical therapist, someone who can truly balance your hips, balance your pelvis, balance your glutes to get you to be able to recruit your glutes. So many moms after childbirth, they lose hip extension. So they truly can't use their glutes. That's why the mom flat butt epidemic is such a problem. And so we need to really work on on fixing that. And we fix that by training the glutes, getting in touch with the glutes, turning them on with our brains, and then we can really start to do some progressive overload and strengthening of the glutes. But the reality is like, just get the connection first. Most people don't even have the connection. So we have plenty of resources. Even my book, like in my postpartum book, Restore Your Body After Kids, has a whole program on getting your core back. But if your brain can't connect to these muscles, then they probably need to be reset by a pelvic expert physical therapist. So if I haven't said that enough in this episode, I'm sorry. But in the meantime, hopefully you will have a super fit, strong core be part of your New Year's resolution, your new routine, or just be on your list. And we would be happy to help you get in touch with your core and feel a lot stronger in your bones and your body, and keep yourself out from underneath the knife this year, because in next year and in 20 years from now. So wishing you all the best in the new year. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to us on YouTube, share this with your friends, subscribe on Spotify, leave us a 5-star review or 1 star, however you feel about this. But thank you so much for being here. Take care.